we had a number of Australian businesses, including some in the media, who were rocked by a report from the Workplace Gender Equality Agency looking into the gender pay gap rates at some of the nation's top employers. But you say we should take these results with a grain of salt. That's what I've been arguing. There's a massive flaws in the data. Sky News, by the way, was the only media outlet where there was no gender wage gap. In fact, women were paid a little bit more than the men, so the only one. But tell me why you say this data is flawed.
Look, Rita, there was lots of discussion about the pay gap of the report, but not much attention was on the gender. And I'm, as an economist, I collect data myself, and recently there was a massive revolution, I'd say evolution, of how we measure gender. So it's no longer, the answer options are no longer men and women or male, female, but there's male, female, other. And with the growing acceptance of fluidity of how we identify, I don't even know what's the gender pay gap, the gap between who and who.
So this data, does it measure men and women as far as biological men and women, or is it measuring women who may identify as men or vice versa? Is it about self-identification, or is it actual biological reality?
The problem with that particular report and how they collected the data, the Gender Workplace Equality Agency didn't collect the actual data on gender themselves. They used what companies reported their employees are. And there's absolutely no consistency. They can be, in some companies, they might have 10 answer options to the gender question. In others, they could be just male, female. And another dimension to that is usually this sort of data on employees is collected at the point when you are being hired. So you report, I'm a woman, or I'm a man, or whatever else options are there. And that answer is now impacted a lot by the length of the employment. So with the example of Qantas, and that's what I'm worried about is happening, is this data, their gender data would have been collected for many employees many, many years ago. Because we know when Qantas people do work long time, they're quite loyal, especially the flight attendants. As opposed to newly established companies, it could be somebody who reported their gender last year, and they could identify as women being biological men and vice versa.
But isn't the problem with the Qantas example that, yes, they have a massive gender wage gap, but you expect pilots to be earning more than flight attendants, and the flight attendants tend to be female and the pilots tend to be male. Now, you can look at the reasons behind that, but again, that's just a reality. So what's the... No, you're shaking your head.
It is a reality, but also, do you know what? In terms of Qantas, I almost feel like gender pay gap coefficient measured the freedom of choice rather than the actual gender pay gap. I just spoke to my friend who is a Qantas flight attendant, and she's a young girl. She dreamed about this flight attendant job, and I asked her, why don't you become a pilot? And she looked at me and she said, no way, I want to have a family, and it's huge responsibility that I do not want to take. And the whole rhetoric in this conversation was, I do not want.
Well, that's what I've long argued for in the most, what would you say, progressive countries, for want of a better word, in the countries where women have equal rights and are most empowered. They have the freedom to pick the industries that they want to work in. So if they prefer education, for example, to engineering, they should not be punished for that as far as being pressured to go into a field they're not interested in. But, of course, education is probably going to pay less than engineering.
You know what the example in history when people were not supposed to choose their occupation or mode of employment, or whether they're allowed to...
You know where this doesn't exist? in a country like Iran. Like Iran actually has way more women as a percentage in the STEM fields, but really, do we want to emulate Iran? Is that what we're asking?
Well, if we want to tell people what to do for work, and as there was pointed out on one of the interviews that we should encourage women to be pilots and engineers, that stinks of communism and Soviet Union, when it was illegal to work and government planned economy was directing where you're supposed to work and which location. They could send you to Siberia to do your job.
Don't give them ideas, Nataliya. Now, today we learned that health insurance premiums are going up further. Almost 15 million private health insurance customers will experience an increase in their premiums from April 1. That's according to the Health Minister, who got the announcement today. But some of those are going up more than others. NIB, for example, is jumping 4.1%, Medibank 3.3%, Bupa 3.61%. We've already got people dropping out of private health insurance, Nataliya, because they cannot afford it. We've had dozen interest rate increases. This isn't going to help matters.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The private health insurance is one of the first thing people drop when the cost of living pressure is looming, because it falls under the discretionary expenses. That's something you can live without. We're not talking about long-term consequences and long-term adverse health outcomes, but also interestingly, when this whole rhetoric about supermarket prices was, and I did check by industry where the largest increase in prices was, it's finance and insurance.
Absolutely. And it's not a small amount. It's not like a carton of eggs going up 5%. It is significant amount.
And I don't understand why.
Well, I've got some reasons, but we don't have time to delve into there. Dr. Nataliya Ilyushina, thank you so much for coming in tonight. Do appreciate it.